for our project, we decided we wanted to kind of look at a specific phenomenon that was occurring in our box and slightly talked about in other boxes throughout this semester, which was the case of having cases that have an A next to them versus not having an A to them. This especially occurred during my section of the boxes because we were doing that. We kind of split, not our boxes, we split the number of folders in our box. So we decided to kind of answer that question. We decided to make a timeline and hence our title, Tule Lake Box 18, timeline of A201 slash 201 to A260 slash 260. And we decided to do it on Prezi just because, well, one, we did not know that kind of the first group used for their timeline. We didn't know that software existed. But also because with Prezi, you're allowed to zoom in on certain items. So we thought, oh, that would be a good way to do it here, since we could put a lot of things, especially this adds up to like around 120 cases, very much encompassing kind of the first and second folder in the box. So we decided to go with Prezi with that, and also because we never really had used Prezi before, so we thought, oh, this would be a good way to maybe deal with a piece of software and presentation creation that we would learn through the process of using. And this process, oh, hold on here. What is going on? Yes, I am very satisfied with you. Could you not do that now? No, I don't. Bob, I want to say Bob. Sorry about that. Why is this not going in the direction we thought I was going to go? Okay, there we go. All right, so I'll have to do it this way. So our process of creation then was that each of us was delegated to 60 cases. Kirsten got the cases that had an A next to them, while I got the cases that were just strictly numerical. Uh, at these cases, we went back into the reports, and most of these are just based on the reports. We didn't consult the cards for this, and we basically looked at type, incident date, location, and the main principles of people. And we examined also how the case was resolved. So, and initially we thought, in our own hopeful ignorance, that these cases would be organized in terms of date. So case one, two, and three would all happen on a later date. But as we kind of looked over these cases more, we actually noticed that the cases that, even though they would be right next to each other, sometimes would be one would be earlier than the other, or one would be later than the other. And a possible reason for this is one, we think it was more organized by report date than or report date or resolve date than by incident date. But for the case of this timeline, we stuck to incident date. So our timeline is organized chronologically by that, but sometimes the case numbers don't are a little bit out of order. But that's because we chose with that, because we wanted at least to go with a timeline version of when events occur.
So the non-A cases only occurred in 1943, while the A cases occurred in 1944. That was kind of our main, one of our main goals in doing this was to see if there was any overlap between the two, because they were filed as if they were the same case. So the dates were jumping back and forth between 43 and 44, and we wanted to kind of separate the non-A's and A's to see if there was overlap. Turns out there wasn't, and like Josh said, they weren't in perfect chronological order. Cases had incident dates occur out of case order. And we think that could be, in addition to people reporting things later, it could also be due to them reorganizing the case numbers, as we will discuss in greater detail in a second.
So with that in mind, before going into kind of particular cases, we kind of took characteristics of what are the main types of cases we found across the A's and non-A's. For the non-A cases, we mainly found it was either events where camp officials, so either officials from the WRA or like internal security, or even block managers, which seem to be people, Japanese Americans who were living in the blocks, but were either bestowed upon by the WRA or security offices as being like you're the leader of your block. So so there were sometimes events where those officials were harassed either physically or verbally. In both of those, in the physical instances, nobody was hurt, but it was just enough harassment to warrant detention. Next is buildings were robbed either through petty theft, which seemed to be more of people stealing things like smaller objects of things, or full on burglaries, where there was some sort of break in as well as a large, substantial enough of items were being stolen. And oftentimes, the buildings that were being stolen from were buildings that the WRA had set up. So, like the high school or the maintenance area or warehouses, things that were very integral to kind of WRA control of the camp. And then finally, others dealing with people simply disobeying protocols, either being out of bounds or leaving projects on the camp that they were not meant to leave or left without permission. So, an example of that for the ones that I found was case 204, which is one of the earliest, occurred on June 25th, 1943, and it was an out of bounds offense. And it dealt with Tetsu Sato, who was reported out of bounds, and he was spotted by a WRA official or slash internal security officer who was patrolling and found him near off kind of the north side of the camp. And his claim was that he was walking home from from a friend's block, but got lost. And I like to take Sato at his word because this case was resolved due to kind of how cut and dry it was. But Sato did receive a nose injury from an MP who supposedly said he was resisting moving resisting assistance from them. So it does show that they took some of those ideas, especially not being in places that they should be, very, very seriously. Another type was burglaries, and I highlighted these specifically because they dealt either with a block such as 4207 CD or at a canteen, which was like a designated rest stop area that the WRA. And all across them, various items were stolen either from people or even from the building itself. And all across them, despite how severe they were, especially since all of them, the reports suspected that it was done by the same group of people due to how similar the form of burglary was being done. Most of the time being at when people were not looking or physically breaking in by breaking into windows or drilling holes into like doors to unlock them from the inside. And often these cases were dropped when no suspects were found due to lack of witnesses or simply nobody coming forward. So it was very interesting to see kind of these severe cases dealing with WRA buildings, but not being addressed due to a lack of maybe either help, either from maybe the community not saying anything or simply nobody knowing, and not enough resources were going into investigation. So that was very interesting to kind of see as well. And then finally, for the harassment, we have one of case 239, which occurred on October 1st, 1943. And this was interesting because this dealt with a teenager, and it kind of deals with some of the cases that we've talked about this semester that even children were not susceptible. We're also susceptible to kind of being through this blockchain of paranoia and kind of control of the camps. So it dealt with George Gyotoko, who supposedly used profane language to internal security officers. It occurred at the high school there and was used to defy the officers' request for the students to leave the school after hours. So again, this idea of regulation of where people should and should not be, but because they were not following it, which could be a form of resistance, it was counted as some form of criminal act, even though it was simply just them using profane language at them.
And for the A cases, some of the trends that I found were petty theft, a few occupational accidents, several recreational or at-home accidents that occurred when they were not at their jobs, and the inclusion of general orders in the case number system. So this one is an example of a petty theft case, case A237. It was reported by Alice Stowers. I believe she was an officer's wife. She accused a servant who was a detainee of stealing clothing from her home. The servant was found innocent. She was interviewed. That's probably yeah,
Interviewed.
quote unquote interviewed. But she was very adamant and steadfast in her testimony, and she was found innocent. You can go to the next one. Oh, you skipped the one that had 2 in it.
Oh, sorry about that.
You're good, no worries. This is an example of where they included general orders. Interestingly, case A230 on the right was originally numbered A216, but it looks like they realized after the fact that they wanted to include general orders in their case numbering system. So the general order was just an instruction for new watch change schedule for the employees. And then case A230 was a case where children were asked not to play on top of warehouse supplies. They were not given any official reprimand. It was just recorded, I'm guessing because it was like a disturbance of peace or something. But yeah, this was a case where they retroactively did change the numbers to try to organize it. This is an example of an occupational accident. Iwao Horiuchi dislocated their, or sorry, not occupational. This is a recreational accident. I misspoke. They dislocated their thumb while playing baseball, and the thumb was reset at the hospital. There were several incidents in the A 200, 201 to 260. I think there were 4 cases of people getting injured while playing baseball, which I found interesting because I don't know, it was just kind of like the human aspect of it again, of people were still playing sports and enjoying themselves and also getting injured because that happens a lot if you're playing a sport.
So throughout all of this, then, so what does this possibly mean? Because as much as this is a good timeline, we wanted to at least somehow contribute to the knowledge of the camps, or at least how they were structured. And we ultimately decided, as pointed out through this, both in terms of 1943 and 1944 having the exact same number of case file, same numbering of cases, but they're completely different cases, as well as Kirsten pointed out with 216 and 230, they renumbered things to include general orders. We're thinking that this maybe indicates some idea that throughout the creation and running of the camp, the the camp officials and the WRA was still kind of adjusting the reporting system and how they would organize and catalog everything. So it seems that as a result, they were every year or every maybe few months, they would try to maybe readjust the system. And it's also seen in how the A's are more official in terminology and efficient in recording data, especially in terms of the placement of things and like how detailed there are compared to the non-A's. So I feel this is important because, as Kirsten will point out, how it connects to the larger project.
Yeah, so in connection to the internment camp documentation as a whole, we were trying to think of just different examples of future projects that could be undertaken with this information. You could cross-reference it with other camps to see if this organization phenomenon of repeating the same case numbers is occurring there and what dates it was occurring, to see if they decided kind of in one full swoop to include the A or the LF as other groups had, or if that was a camp by camp decision. You could also look at documents from Tule Lake in 1942 when it first opened to see what kind of organization system was used at the beginning of the camp, because 201 was at, I believe it was in July of 1942 1943 and it opened in November of 1942. And with how much we have seen them report things that are or criminalize and reporting things, there's no way that there were only 200 cases in that 9 month period.
Hmm.
So they had to have renumbered it at least twice to get to the 201 initially and then to do the A numbers at the beginning. So connecting it to a larger project would be to see how that organization system evolved.
And we feel this would also help with a larger arrangement of these files if they are digitized as well. Because maybe this would affect what metadata is put in. Because if it's a different case number for each time, we have to make note of that. Maybe even separate the boxes based on years and folders based on years instead of just relying on the case numbers as well. But that is our full timeline as well.